We simply sit when we are tired, or when our work asks us to, or when we want to read, to talk, or to eat. The chair beneath us is so ordinary that it almost disappears. Tonight, we are going to give it a little more attention. We are going to follow the long, quiet story of how humans learned to sit the way we do now. We will trace a path from bare ground and rough stone, to carved thrones and simple stools, to the familiar chairs and seats that fill our homes, offices, trains, and waiting rooms today. It is a surprisingly long story, and at every step, there are human hands shaping wood, weaving fibers, smoothing surfaces. There are tired backs, sore legs, happy gatherings, and slowly changing ideas about what it means to rest. As we move through this story, you do not need to remember details or dates. You can let them drift by like clouds. If your mind wanders, that is perfectly all right. If you fall asleep in the middle of a scene, the chairs will continue their journey without you, carrying you gently along. For a moment, imagine your own chair, or whatever is beneath you, as part of a great family tree. You might picture it as a simple silhouette, 4 legs, or maybe 5 on wheels, a flat seat, a back that leans up behind you, perhaps curving a little. Maybe there are armrests that cradle your forearms, or soft cushions that give way slowly as you lower your weight. That shape, that quiet outline against the room, is the end of thousands of years of experimenting with how a human body prefers to bend and rest. It carries hints of earlier shapes: low stools, benches, royal seats, woven mats, carved stone. The angle of the back, the height of the seat, the way it meets your thighs. These are the result of countless small decisions. People long ago may not have spoken about ergonomics the way designers do today. But they noticed, as you notice, when something felt good to sit on. And they noticed, sometimes a little too late, when it did not. So to begin, imagine slowly stepping backward in time. See your familiar chair fading into earlier forms. The casters disappear. The metal frame softens into wood. The padded seat becomes a woven surface of rushes or straw. The screws and modern joints become pegs and mortise and tenon connections made by hand. Go back further, and the backrest drops away. The armrests vanish. You are left with a simple stool, perhaps 3-legged, perhaps 4. A small, portable circle or square that lifts you just a little off the ground. And then, as we go back still more, even that disappears, and all that remains is the earth itself. The story of the chair begins there, with human beings and the ground beneath their feet. Imagine a very long time ago, long before the first palace was built, long before anyone carved a throne. The sun has set, and a group of people gather around a fire. The flames flicker, making the shadows around them breathe and shift. The air smells of smoke and cooked food and the coolness of the approaching night. No one has a chair. Some people squat close to the fire, balancing on the balls of their feet, knees folded up near their chests. Others kneel, resting their weight on folded legs. A few sit cross-legged on the ground, their backs perhaps leaning against a rock or a fallen tree. The ground is the first seat universal, simple, always present. For early humans, the main question was not what kind of furniture to build, but how to survive the day. They walked, gathered, hunted, carried children, made tools, and told stories. When they needed to rest, they simply lowered themselves to the earth. Over time, people began to notice certain spots that felt better than others. A flat rock, warmed by the sun, could be a welcome place to sit and rest tired legs. A fallen log, its bark rough, but its surface raised a little above the damp soil, might become a favorite place to stop and watch the world. In colder places, animal skins laid over the ground softened the contact with frozen soil or sharp stones. In warmer regions, people wove grasses, reeds, or palm leaves into mats that could be spread out at mealtimes or rolled up and carried away. These early mats were the ancestors of many later forms of seating. On a mat, you could sit cross-legged with your knees open and relaxed. You could kneel with your legs folded beneath you. You could lie down on your side, propped on one elbow. A mat did not decide your posture for you. It simply offered a cleaner, slightly softer surface between you and the earth. In many cultures, this way of sitting, low, close to the ground, remained perfectly natural for thousands of years, and continues even today. In some parts of the world, people still gather daily on woven mats, on carpets, or directly on the earth to share meals, tea, and conversation. The human body is well adapted to these low postures when they are practiced from childhood. Squatting, kneeling, sitting with legs folded. These positions use different muscles than chair sitting and can feel natural and relaxed. But as time passed, people also began to notice that being just a little higher had advantages. A raised surface can keep you away from damp soil, crawling insects, and dirt. It can also make it easier to stand up quickly if needed. And when someone sits a little higher than others, it subtly changes how they are seen. Imagine a circle of people, most of them on the ground. One person is perched on a convenient rock or a stump that lifts them a little above the rest. Without anyone planning it, that person begins to seem more prominent. If they are telling a story, others may look up at them. If decisions are being made, their raised position makes their voice easier to hear. This simple difference, a little more height, a little more separation from the earth, is one of the seeds from which the idea of a chair would eventually grow. For a long time, though, the ground and simple logs, rocks, and mats were enough. People moved easily between postures as the day went on. They crouched to work with tools. They knelt to tend a fire. They sat with legs folded to eat. They lay down on their sides to rest when darkness settled in. The human spine, hips, and legs followed these rhythms. And the idea of spending many hours in one fixed, upright sitting position on a raised seat would have seemed strange. But human beings are restless problem solvers. Even when nothing is urgently wrong, we tinker. We notice small inconveniences and quietly look for ways to ease them. A log that rolls under your weight might be flattened on one side. A rock with an awkward angle might be chipped until it feels better beneath you. A low platform might be built from packed earth or stones. Little by little, these adjustments moved people from simply accepting the shapes the natural world provided toward shaping their environment to fit their own bodies. Out of this slow, steady habit of tinkering, one day, in one place or another, someone added legs to a flat surface. They lifted the seat higher off the ground and set it on supports, in doing so, they took an important step toward the first true chairs. When archaeologists look back at the earliest furniture that clearly resembles our idea of a chair, they often find it in places of power. In ancient Egypt, for example, chairs appear in tomb paintings and in surviving wooden pieces that have been preserved for thousands of years. These early chairs were not simple, temporary objects. They were carefully crafted items, often made of strong woods, decorated with carving, inlay, and sometimes precious materials. The seat might be woven from plant fibers or leather strips, stretched tightly between the frames. The legs could be carved to resemble the legs of animals, lions, bulls, or other powerful creatures. The back of the chair rose up to support the sitter, sometimes gently curved, sometimes straight and formal. Most importantly, these chairs were not for everyone. They were, in many cases, for the elite, for rulers, for high officials, for the people whose decisions shaped the lives of many others. Ordinary people still sat on mats, benches, or low stools, or simply on the ground. In scenes painted on the walls of tombs, we sometimes see a figure of high status seated on a chair, while others stand or kneel before them. The chair lifts the seated person above the level of those around them, creating a clear sense of hierarchy. The same pattern appears in other ancient cultures. In the civilizations of the Near East, in palaces and temples, special seats were created for rulers and for the gods they worshipped. These could be made from wood, stone, or metal. They might have high backs and armrests. They stood on platforms. They were sometimes approached by steps. In such settings, the chair became more than a tool for resting the body. It became a symbol. To sit in the special seat was to occupy a role. The chair might even be referred to as a throne, a word that suggests ceremony, authority, and a connection to something larger than the individual. In the ancient Greek world, a particular form of chair developed that would later be admired and copied by designers many centuries afterward. This was the klysmos, a chair with elegantly curved legs that swept out and back under the seat, and a backrest that curved gently to follow the line of the human spine. We know the klysmos mostly from sculptures and vase paintings, since many of the original wooden chairs have not survived. In these images, the chair looks surprisingly light and refined. The curve of the back suggests that comfort, not only ceremony, was taken into account. Even here, however, chairs were not yet universal. Many people still sat on stools or benches, or on low platforms. The klysmos and other fully developed chairs were notable pieces, associated with certain settings, certain rooms, certain roles. The Romans, too, adapted and created their own special seats. One famous type was the curule chair, a kind of folding stool with crossed legs. In Roman society, this stool was granted to certain magistrates and officials. To sit on a curule chair indicated that you held particular powers granted by the state. In all these cases, a pattern emerges: to sit on a chair with a back, and sometimes with arms, raised above the floor on sturdy supports, in a setting where most people did not have such seats, was to be seen differently. The chair itself became part of the performance of power. When a judge took their seat, or a ruler sat upon a throne, the act of sitting down was almost like putting on a crown. body was supported not only in a physical sense, but in a symbolic one too. Meanwhile, for the majority of people in these societies, everyday life continued with much simpler forms of seating. In homes and workshops, we find little evidence of personal chairs for every person. Families gathered on benches, on chests that doubled as seats and storage, on low platforms and mats. In many places, food was eaten while reclining on couches or lying on one side around a low table. The idea of each person having their own chair, pulled up to an individual place at a table, would take a very long time to emerge. Still, something had changed. The chair, a raised seat, often with a back, made for one person, now existed in the world's imagination. Once such an object appears, it tends to spread and evolve. And over the centuries that followed, chairs slowly began to step down from palaces and ceremonial halls into more ordinary rooms. To understand how chairs became everyday companions rather than rare symbols, it helps to picture a simpler room than a throne hall. Imagine a modest house, perhaps in a small town in medieval Europe. The walls might be of wood or stone. The floor could be packed earth, or simple planks, or rough stone slabs. Light comes in through small windows, or through an open door. A fire burns in a hearth, its smoke curling up toward a hole in the roof, or finding its way out around the edges of a chimney. What are people sitting on in this room? Most likely, the central piece of furniture is a heavy wooden table, thick and solid. Along one or more sides of the table, there are benches, long planks supported by legs or simple trestles. The benches can hold several people at once. At mealtimes, the family gathers on these benches. They may squeeze together to make room for everyone. Someone might balance on a trunk that usually serves to store linens or clothing, using it for seating when extra guests arrive. Around the fire, there could be low stools, three-legged, so they stand firmly even on an uneven floor. These stools are light enough to be moved where they are needed. One might be pulled close to the hearth when it is time to stir a pot or bake bread. Another might be carried over to a window for someone spinning wool or mending clothes. In this environment, a chair with a full backrest and possibly arms stands out. Perhaps there is one such chair in the room, and it belongs to the head of the household. Its back rises higher than the shoulders, enclosing the sitter a little, sheltering them from drafts. The arms provide a place to rest hands, to lean, to gesture. When the family sits down to eat, this chair might be placed at the head of the table or near the fire. Others take their places on the benches and stools. The single chair marks a particular status within the small community of the household, just as a throne does in a larger hall. Over generations, however, things begin to change. Craftspeople refine their techniques. Carpenters learn to join wood more securely, allowing them to make chairs that are both strong and lighter than the massive seats of earlier times. They experiment with different shapes of backrests and legs. At the same time, social life slowly shifts. As towns grow, as trade brings new materials and ideas, as more people gain some measure of comfort and stability, furniture becomes more varied. By the later Middle Ages and into the early modern period, we find more forms of everyday chairs appearing in homes. There are simple ladder-back chairs with vertical posts and horizontal slats forming the back, and a seat woven from rushes or other plant fibers. These chairs are relatively straightforward to build. The woven seat provides a little give under the sitter, making them more comfortable than a solid plank. There are also box chairs with paneled sides and backs, sometimes decorated with carving. These chairs may still feel solid and a little heavy, but they create a sense of a personal, enclosed space within their wooden frame. Still, even as chairs become more common, benches and stools do not disappear. In large halls, long tables and benches remain practical for feeding many people. In simple cottages, a mix of seating types provides flexibility. A stool can become a small table. A chest can be both storage and seat. A bench can be moved along a wall to open space in the center of a room. It takes time for the idea of a chair for every person to truly take hold. But slowly, the balance tips. In many parts of Europe, by the time of the Renaissance, chairs are no longer exclusively symbols of nobility. They begin to appear more often in the homes of merchants, artisans, and other members of a growing middle class. Rooms are designed with chairs in mind. A writing desk with a companion chair. A small table flanked by a pair of chairs for quiet conversation. A bedroom with a chair by the bedside, ready to receive a cloak or to offer a place to sit while dressing. In paintings from these periods, we see people reading, playing music, embroidering, or simply resting in chairs that are clearly part of everyday life, not rare treasures. Even so, the world does not move in perfect unison. While chairs spread in Europe in this way, many other cultures continue to favor floor sitting or low platforms for daily life. Even within Europe, some people find chairs uncomfortable or unfamiliar and prefer to perch on higher surfaces, lean against walls, or stand. Different answers to the question, "How shall we sit?" coexist for a long time. As we continue our quiet journey, we will look more closely at some of those different answers and at how they reflect the landscapes, climates, buildings, and customs of the people who chose them. If you picture a typical scene of people sitting, your mind might go immediately to chairs and a table. But around the world and across history, humans have found many other ways to arrange their bodies for rest and for company. Let us drift for a while through some of these different approaches. Imagine entering a traditional Japanese room covered with tatami mats. The mats are made of rice straw and have a faint, grassy scent. They form a soft but firm surface underfoot. There are no tall chairs here and no raised beds. Instead, there may be low tables and cushions. People sit on the floor in several ways. Seiza, kneeling with legs folded beneath the body, cross-legged, or in other relaxed variations. At mealtimes, dishes are placed on low tables. When it is time to sleep, bedding is unrolled directly on the tatami. The entire rhythm of movement in such a room is shaped by this closeness to the floor. Standing up means rising from a low position. Sitting down requires folding the legs and lowering the body with control. The line between sitting, kneeling, and lying down is more fluid than it tends to be in a chair-based room. Now think of a different environment. A tent or a room in parts of the Middle East or Central Asia, where thick carpets and cushions cover the floor. Here, too, you may find low tables or none at all. People gather on the carpets, leaning on cushions, sitting cross-legged, or with legs stretched to one side. The fabrics beneath them add warmth and softness. Hospitality might be expressed through the offering of a place on these cushions, with tea or coffee served from a pot that sits within easy reach of those seated. In some African societies, traditional seating took the form of low, often carved stools. These might be made from a single piece of wood, shaped carefully by hand. A person sitting on such a stool is again close to the ground, but with the hips slightly elevated, the knees bent. These stools can be highly personal objects. A particular stool may belong to an individual and be carried or placed in a specific spot when that person sits. Some stools also carry symbolic meaning, indicating age, gender, or social role. In each of these examples, the way people sit is tightly woven into their surroundings. The height of the doors and windows, the position of the hearth, the type of work people do, the clothing they wear, all of these influence whether a culture finds tall chairs natural, or prefers lower seating, or treats the ground itself as the primary surface. When tall chairs do spread from one region to another, they bring new habits with them. If you introduce high tables and chairs into a culture used to floor sitting, you also change how people cook, how they serve food, how they store items, and how they design their rooms. Shelves may rise higher up the walls. Windows may be adjusted so that someone seated in a chair can see outside comfortably. At the same time, floor sitting continues in many places. Even as chairs become more common, a person might sit at a desk on a chair during the day, and then come home to a living room with low cushions and a coffee table. Or they might use chairs at work, but choose to sit on the floor to stretch and relax at home. This variety reminds us that the chair, as familiar as it may feel in some parts of the world, is only one possible answer to the question of comfort. Still, as global trade expanded and colonial powers carried their furniture styles with them, chair sitting spread more widely. Schools, government offices, churches, and other institutions built or influenced by European models often included rows of chairs or pews. Imported furniture, or locally made versions of it, sometimes became associated with modernity or status. In some places, this created a mixture of traditions. A formal room might be furnished with chairs and a high table, used for receiving certain guests or conducting official business. Other rooms in the same home might retain floor seating, cushions, or low platforms for family gatherings. Even today, in many cities, you can find cafes with chairs and tall tables, restaurants with low seating and cushions, and homes that mix sofas, chairs, and floor arrangements according to taste and habit. Our bodies adapt to these different environments, learning to be comfortable in several ways, or favoring one posture over another. Behind all of this, quietly, are the people who design and make the things we sit on. So now, let us step into the world of the craftsperson, the maker of chairs and stools and benches, the person who thinks daily about how a seated body feels. Picture a small woodworking shop some centuries ago. The room smells of sawdust and shavings, of fresh-cut wood, and perhaps a hint of linseed oil or beeswax. Light filters in through a window, catching floating dust motes and turning them into slow, drifting stars. In one corner, long planks lean against the wall. On a bench, clamps and chisels wait. A plane rests where it was last set down, its blade showing the faint sheen that comes from careful sharpening. This is where chairs are born. A craftsperson, perhaps a single individual, perhaps a small team, begins with raw material. In many parts of the world, that material is wood. Oak, beech, ash, pine, or other local species, with the right combination of strength and workability. The wood must be seasoned, dried to a suitable level so that it will be stable. Too wet, and it will warp and crack as it dries. Too dry, and it may be brittle and difficult to shape. From this material, the maker shapes the different parts of a chair. There are legs, which must be strong and stable. In some chairs, they are straight. In others, they may be turned on a lathe, forming elegant curves and beads. In yet others, like the old Greek klysmos or its later descendants, they curve gently outward. There is the seat, which might be a solid board, a frame with woven material stretched across it, or a platform built from joined pieces. There is the back, which can be tall or short, straight or slightly inclined, paneled, slatted, or formed from delicate spindles. These pieces must be joined together in a way that holds under the shifting weight of human bodies. Traditional joinery relies on methods like the mortise and tenon joint, where a projecting tenon on one piece fits tightly into a matching hollow, or mortise in another, often secured with glue, and sometimes with wooden pegs. Done well, these joints can last for generations. If the chair has a woven seat, the craftsperson, or perhaps a specialist, will weave strips of rush, cane, or other plant fibers back and forth across the frame. This weaving must be tight enough to support weight, but with just enough give to yield slightly when someone sits down. Over time, the strands will stretch and adapt to the shapes of the people who use the chair. In some workshops, upholstery adds another layer. A frame is built, and then webbing, springs, stuffing, and fabric are added on top. The result is a chair with a soft, padded surface, inviting the sitter to sink in a little. Each type of chair brings its own challenges. A simple stool may be easy to make, but must be carefully balanced so it does not wobble. A high-backed armchair requires more pieces, more joints, and careful attention to how the forces of a leaning body travel down to the floor. For the maker, there is also an emotional dimension. They may never meet the person who will use this chair, but they have to imagine them. They imagine someone tired from a long day of work, lowering their weight slowly, grateful for a place to rest. They imagine someone sitting with a child on their lap, or with a book, or with a cup of something warm. Their hands must translate that imagined comfort into angles and lengths. If the seat is too high, shorter legs will dangle uncomfortably. If it is too low, standing up will require more effort. If the back is too straight, people may feel stiff. If it is too reclined, it may be hard to use the chair for tasks that require attention. Over years of experience, the craftsperson builds up a quiet knowledge of these things. They know how a chair feels even before it is finished, just by looking at its proportions, by pressing on a joint, by running a hand along the edge of a seat. Yet even in the most carefully made chairs, imperfection slowly appears. Wood swells and shrinks with changes in humidity. Joints loosen. A woven seat begins to sag in the middle after many years of use. A favorite chair might develop a small creak when someone sits down, a familiar sound that becomes part of the background of daily life. People rarely discard a beloved chair at the first sign of wear. Instead, they repair. A loose leg is tightened, perhaps with a new wedge or a bit of glue. A broken rung is replaced. A seat is rewoven. Cushions are restuffed. In this way, a chair can accompany several generations of a family. A grandparent may recall being rocked to sleep in a particular chair, and then, many years later, find themselves rocking a grandchild in the same piece of furniture. Its wood darkened by decades of touch. As we move our attention forward in time, we will see how the place of the craftsperson changes when factories appear, and when chairs begin to be made in huge numbers for offices, schools, trains, and waiting rooms. But even then, the quiet wisdom of the workshop does not disappear entirely. It continues to inform the shapes and structures that support us, even when they come from machines. 7. The industrial age. Factories, offices, and the problem of sitting. For most of human history, work kept people moving. Farmers walked their fields. Craftspeople stood at benches, turning, bending, using their hands. Sellers in markets carried goods, lifted baskets, and walked among customers. Rest was something people did in between these movements, not for many hours at a stretch. With the coming of the Industrial Revolution, much of that began to change. Factories drew large numbers of people into centralized workplaces. Machines took over some forms of physical labor, while human workers tended, monitored, and fed them. In offices, a new kind of work expanded: reading, writing, calculating, typing. This work required long periods of close attention to documents, ledgers, and eventually, typewriters and telegraphs. Chairs took on a new role. Instead of being primarily for rest, or for brief tasks like eating and sewing, they became places where people spent many continuous hours each day. In early factories and offices, the chairs provided were often simple and hard. A wooden stool or straight-backed chair might be placed at a desk or a machine. It needed to be strong, easy to build, and replaceable. Comfort was not always the first concern of employers. People sat on these chairs for long stretches, shoulders bent forward, eyes focused on their work. After hours of such sitting, bodies protested, backs ached, necks grew stiff, legs felt heavy. Still, for many workers, there was little choice but to continue. In some places, inventors and manufacturers began to experiment with new designs. They created chairs that could swivel, allowing a seated person to turn from one task to another without standing. They added casters, small wheels, to allow the chair to roll across the floor. In laboratories, a naturalist like Charles Darwin is said to have added wheels to his chair so he could move quickly between his specimens and notes. In offices, similar ideas began to spread, and the rolling office chair slowly entered the scene. Other innovators played with springs and adjustable parts. Some chairs were designed to tilt backwards slightly, letting the sitter lean and shift their weight. Others used curved supports and padded seats in an attempt to reduce the strain of long sitting. Still, many of these early designs were more about efficiency than about health. Companies wanted their workers to be able to move a little, to reach drawers and shelves without standing, to turn from one desk to another, or from a typewriter to a stack of papers. Chairs with wheels and swivels made this easier. Meanwhile, in public spaces, chairs were appearing in new ways. Railway carriages offered seats arranged in rows or compartments, allowing passengers to sit as they traveled at speeds previously known only to wind and water. Theaters and concert halls filled with folding or fixed seats, designed to accommodate large audiences in relatively compact spaces. Cinemas added their own varieties, sometimes with plush upholstery that invited people to sink back and relax in the dark. In schools, rows of desks and chairs lined classrooms, training children from an early age to sit in one spot, facing forward for much of the day. All of this made chairs more familiar than ever before. At the same time, a new problem slowly became clear. Human bodies are not well suited to being still for very long. We are built to move, to shift, to stand, and walk and bend. When we sit for many hours, especially with poor support, our muscles and joints can become strained. By the 20th century, doctors and researchers began to study the effects of prolonged sitting more closely. They noticed patterns: back pain, neck tension, circulation issues. Designers and engineers started to ask a new question. How can we make chairs that not only allow people to sit and work, but also support their bodies in a healthier way? This is where the modern idea of ergonomics, designing tools and environments to fit the human body and mind, enters the story more clearly. 8. Ergonomics and modern comfort. How we try to sit correctly. If you look at many modern office chairs, you will notice features that earlier chairs did not have. There may be a curved backrest that follows the natural shape of the spine. There might be a pronounced support in the lower back region, often called lumbar support. The seat height may be adjustable. Armrests might rise or fall, move in or out. The whole chair might tilt gently backward, encouraging a more open angle between thigh and torso. All of these features are responses to the same basic realization. Sitting is not a neutral act. The way a chair holds us can make a significant difference to how our bodies feel over time. Ergonomics, as a field, studies how people interact with objects and systems. When it comes to chairs, ergonomists look at the shapes of spines, the lengths of legs, the angles at which joints are most comfortable. They consider how long people sit, what they do with their arms and hands, where they place their feet. From this research, guidelines emerge. They suggest that, for many people, a good sitting posture includes feet resting flat on the floor or on a footrest, thighs roughly horizontal, knees bent at about a right angle, and the back supported so that the natural curve of the spine is maintained. Arms in this picture are supported at a height where shoulders can relax, and wrists are not sharply bent when using a keyboard or other tools. Chairs are then designed to make this posture easier to maintain without constant effort. Of course, no single chair can fit every body perfectly. People vary widely in height, in limb length, in flexibility, in personal preference. That is why modern adjustable chairs exist. You may have used such a chair yourself. Perhaps you have reached for a lever under the seat to raise or lower it. You might have turned a knob to adjust the tilt, or pressed buttons to move armrests. As you did these things, you were participating in a long history of humans trying to fine-tune the way they sit. Beyond offices, other kinds of chairs also show this concern for comfort and support. Recliners allow people to lean back, elevating their legs and spreading their weight over a larger area. Lounge chairs cradle the body in a more relaxed posture, suitable for reading or quiet conversation. Even in public places, seating has evolved. Cinema seats, train seats, and airplane seats are often shaped to encourage a certain resting posture, though they must also balance comfort with cost, durability, and space. At home, many people develop a special relationship with a particular seat. There might be one chair in the living room that feels just right, the place where you naturally go when you are tired, or when you want to read, or when you are feeling unwell. The cushions of that chair gradually mold themselves to the pattern of your body. The armrests hold the memory of your hands. Some people also experiment with alternatives to conventional chairs. Kneeling chairs encourage the sitter to divide their weight between knees and seat, changing the angle of the spine. Large exercise balls used as seats allow small, constant movements that can engage core muscles and reduce some types of strain. Standing desks with high stools offer yet another variation, letting people alternate between standing and perching. At the same time, floor-sitting traditions have seen a quiet revival. Some people choose low tables and cushions at home, believing that gently shifting between cross-legged, kneeling, and other positions can feel more natural than remaining at a fixed chair height. Through all of these options, one theme remains clear. We are still learning how to sit. Even with all our research and technology, there is no one perfect chair that suits everyone all the time. Instead, we have created a wide landscape of possibilities, each with its own strengths and trade-offs. Perhaps, then, the most helpful way to think about chairs is not to search for a single correct way to sit, but to appreciate how these objects offer us support while we move through the changing rhythms of our days. Now, as this story begins to draw toward its close, we can return our attention to something very simple. You, your own body, and the place where you are resting right now. 9. A gentle night reflection. You, your chair, and the long story of sitting. Take a moment to notice, again, how you are supported. You might be sitting or lying in a familiar spot, a favorite chair, a side of the bed, a soft corner of a sofa. You might be listening in the dark, with only a faint glow somewhere in the room, or perhaps with the curtains drawn against the outside world. Feel the points where your body meets the surface beneath you, the weight of your legs, the way your back rests, the contact of your arms and hands. Perhaps the material is firm beneath you, or perhaps it yields and shapes itself gently around you. Whatever you are resting on, it is part of a story that reaches far back into the past. It is connected, in spirit if not in direct line, to the first mats laid on cold ground, to the first rocks chosen as good places to sit. It echoes the carved thrones of ancient rulers, The simple benches of medieval halls, the low stools carved by hand in small villages, the high-backed chairs by hearths and windows. It carries, in its design, hints of all the questions people have asked about comfort and posture and work. People wondered how to keep themselves off the damp earth. They wondered how to give a leader a visible place among their companions. They wondered how to rest at the end of a long day, how to nurse a child, how to sit and write, how to listen to music, how to talk with friends late into the night. Every time someone picked up a tool to shape wood, to weave fibers, to pad a seat, they were offering an answer to these questions. Those answers traveled across time and place. They were carried in trade caravans, in ships, in the memories of craftspeople who migrated and taught their skills in new lands. They were adapted to new materials, metal, plastic, composite fabrics. They changed as buildings grew taller, as work shifted from fields and workshops to offices and screens. Through all of this, the basic wish remained the same. After effort, after movement, after the many small labors of a day, people wanted somewhere to sit, to pause, to let their weight be held by something outside themselves. The chair, in all its forms, is one of the simplest answers to that wish. Tonight, as you rest, you might imagine that your own chair, or bed, or sofa, or cushion has a kind of quiet memory. It cannot think, of course, but it has felt your presence many times. It knows, in its own mute way, the familiar pattern of your visits, the times you have sunk into it with relief, the moments you have leaned forward with attention, the times you have perhaps dozed off without meaning to, your head tilting, your breathing slowing. Over years, a favorite seat molds itself to you. Cushions flatten where you prefer to sit. Armrests polish under your touch. The frame may creak a little in a way you recognize instantly. In return, you learn to trust it. You know that when you lower yourself into that spot, it will be there, will hold you, will shape itself around your body in a familiar way. This mutual adaptation is one small, quiet part of what it means to live a human life surrounded by objects. The chair does not have to be perfect. It does not need to be the most advanced ergonomic design or a famous classic of furniture history. It simply needs to be there when you are tired, when you think of the long story we have walked through, from bare earth to thrones, from benches to personal seats, from workshops to factories and design studios. It can be comforting to realize that you do not need to remember it all. You can let it fade into the background, like the murmur of distant conversation in another room. All that matters in this moment is that somewhere along the way, human beings learned to make places to sit that feel right for them. They learned to shape wood and weave fibers, to add cushions, to adjust angles, to test and refine. They made chairs for work and chairs for rest, chairs for ceremony and chairs for quiet evenings at home. And one of those many, many chairs, one offshoot of that long, branching history, is the one that is holding you now. If you like, you can imagine the line of connection stretching backward, from your seat through its design and materials to the craftsperson or factory that made it. From there to earlier workshops, older designs, ancient seats in clay and stone and wood. From those, back to the simple choice to sit on a rock instead of directly on the ground. It is a gentle line, not one you need to follow in detail. you can simply sense that you are not alone, that countless people before you have also looked for comfort at the end of their days, have also felt relief when they found it. Your breathing now may be a little slower than when we began. Your muscles may feel heavier, as if gravity has grown just a little kinder, helping you settle. The sounds around you may seem further away or softer, like distant waves. The story of the chair can continue without you. It will go on tomorrow and the day after, as designers dream up new shapes, as people in different parts of the world continue to sit high or low, on cushions or on benches, on stools or on mats. For now, you do not need to think about any of that. You can let your attention grow fuzzy and relaxed, like a picture losing focus. The seat beneath you holds you gently. Your body knows how to rest. The long journey from earth to chair has already been made. All that remains is for you to let go, to drift, to sink a little deeper into the support that has been waiting for you all along. And as you do, the life of the chair and the long story of how humans learned to sit the way we do can become a soft, distant murmur, something you can return to another night if you wish, but do not need to hold on to now. You are supported. You are allowed to rest. The chair, faithful and quiet, will keep its patient watch as you slip calmly towards sleep.